All right, welcome back to JML Studios. I'm Joshua Lutz. Number 8 is the most important of all 15. If it sounds good, it is good. And what does that mean? It means if it sounds good, it is. Don't overthink it. Dave Pensato bought this old Boss EH50. It's this little effects processor unit, total junk, consumer garbage, supposedly. He puts it on a Grammy-winning record, and now it's a legitimate piece of equipment. You can still get them, by the way, for like $100. It has a little enhancer button on it that's like a spatial enhancer slash mid-range boost slash sonic maximizer. Everyone disregards these things as junk, but if you've ever used the Isotope plugin, it's like this sonic maximizer thing. Really cool. It creates a wider 3D soundstage on your audio, and who's to say that this stuff is junk? Everything has an application. Maybe you forgot to take the packing blanket out of an upright piano when it was shipped to you, and it's making this crazy plunky sound. Maybe you have a Roland Juno and the voice chips and the AR chips are going, and the chorus chips are going, and it's giving you this snap, crackle, pop kind of Rice Krispies thing, but when you run it through a distortion pedal or some time-based effect or something, you get a unique sound. I'm telling you, this is where the magic lies. Using the same plugins, I said this in my last video, using the same plugins that oceans of other artists are using with the same binary algorithmic code, you're just another drop in the ocean. But if you take a piece of gear, think of what a kalimba is. It's just like a little strip of metal, and depending on the distance between the little homemade saddle and the length, the actual physical length of that metal strip, it changes the note, the pitch of the note, the frequency of that note. And now you have this beautiful thing called an Afro harp, or a kalimba, or a thumb piano. Those are all synonymous names for this beautiful African instrument. I like to think that it was just made on the side of the street by some creative, brilliant human being. And this is how you should be constantly thinking. If all you're doing is plugging a Fender Strat into a Fender Twin and using a Royer 121 or a 57 into a Neve 1073, or the even worse, or the preamp that came with your interface, you're not going to stand out. Even if it's great music, it could be better by just thinking out of the box. And once you do, you're gonna get some great sound. And never forget, each piece of gear that exists can inspire greatness in some way. And I want you to never forget what I'm about to say. Number 8 was, what was it? If it sounds good, say it with me, it is good. Number 9 is separation is key. And it's really important to know what that word separation means in audio engineering. When you talk about a large format console, sometimes it's abbreviated LFC. When you talk about an LFC, you're talking about individual channels. If you're not familiar with consoles and all the buttons on a console, all you need to know is that every single strip, and they're usually modular, they can pop out, every single strip usually has some kind of busing at the top, then some kind of dynamics like compressors, and then an EQ, and then maybe some mute and solo and a couple other things that we want to get into, and then like a fader, right? Motorized or non. And that strip can be pulled out and put in on any other channel, and it's modular. So this can be taken out to be repaired, and every single channel is the exact same thing. Especially if it's a line mixer, you're just talking about a series of the exact same thing. So when I was in conservatory studying recording arts and sciences, they show you, here's a channel strip, this is what it does. Guess what? Now you know the rest of the console. The only other thing to know on a console is the center section. And even then, all you need to know is like your monitor section and maybe some automation if you want to get fancy. But you don't need to study the SSL center section and those old crazy computers. I did, I learned it, and I rarely use it. So what is separation? It's when you have an audio signal path that passes through one of those channel strips. It passes through transformers and capacitors, and it comes out with separation. What does that mean? That when you stack it against another track, it doesn't live in, it wasn't born in the box, ITB. It was born on its own analog linear channel of circuitry. So when it's stacked up against other linear analog tracks, there's a separation, a large soundstage. An analog world sounds very different than a digital world. And it's harder to achieve separation in the box because it's just all ones and zeros in a program that are tethered to bit depth and sample rate. And when you have a large format console, every piece of audio that you track through it, like on one channel it's a guitar, on another channel it's a snare, on another channel it's a kick, on another channel it's a vocal. Each channel started from a microphone, analog in, through a preamp, through transformers, or maybe transistors and resistors, capacitors and diodes and cathodes, and a VCA and another transformer, and when it comes out, it's totally beautiful analog, It has no false frequencies, no aliases. Maybe it's slammed, and if it hit the top of its headroom, it just has this beautiful saturation. And then it comes out and it goes into your DAW. That's very different than in the box digital soundstage. Now, people realized this a few decades ago, and they said, okay, now we're working in the box. How do we get that large format 3D soundstage? And they invented a summing mixer. And what does a summing mixer do? It essentially gives you that separation. I encourage you to watch videos on what that is on YouTube. I can make one if you'd like, just let me know. But there's so much information about summing mixers already, I'm not going to get into it. But all you need to know is that it gives you large format console separation, analog separation, which is what we want. So how do we get separation in the box if we don't have a summing mixer? Well, here's the key. If you don't have a summing mixer and you don't have a large format console and your ears aren't perfect like all the rest of us, you need some kind of visual guide. So you can carve all the instruments out with EQ. You need a visual guide to guide you for things like LUFS, and especially for phase correlation. You can't always hear that right off the bat. It's nice to have a device that shows you. Those old Doro meters are still getting like $700-800 on eBay. And why? Because people are still using them. It's a very smart tool of the trade. And if you don't have one, I highly recommend the TC Electronic Clarity or the Clarity M, or if you're mixing in 5.1, they have a 5.1 version of that. These things are amazing. You know why I also like them? Because when you're EQing something, like a snare drum, there's a lot of low end on a snare you don't need. When you hit a cymbal, there's a lot of low end on the cymbal rumble that you don't need and don't want. So you want to carve that out. But how do we know exactly what frequencies? Unless you've studied and you've done ear training, which I highly recommend to be able to identify frequencies just by listening to them. Like if I whistle, what frequency was that? That's what frequency that was. And you should know that just by listening. And if you don't, well, guess what? You're like 95% of all the other engineers out there. And you will need some kind of visual guide. The TC Electronic M is the one I use. That way, if it's late and I have ear fatigue and I'm still in the middle of a mix and there's a cymbal crash and I need to know what I can carve out of that, what frequencies I can carve out to make room, that's why we do this, to make room for stuff like kick drum, toms, vocals, guitars. Guitars and cymbals share a lot of the same frequencies. Keyboards and guitars, vocals and keyboards, they share a lot of the same frequencies. Bass and kick drum obviously share a lot of the same frequencies. There's overlap there. That overlap is called mud. Muddiness in a mix is created because you didn't carve these instruments out and create separation. We don't have a large format console, maybe you don't have a summing mixer, but you still need to create separation. And one great way to do that is with EQ. Carving each instrument out into its own space is a fantastic way to create separation. So if you have a visual readout, that's called a spectral analyzer. And when you can look at a spectral analyzer and see that this kick drum lies between these frequencies and this bass guitar lies within these frequencies, you then can carve them out. You should probably also know that bass should be in the middle, where the vocal is. Kick drum and bass actually are panned center, typically, while other instruments are panned left and right. A lot of people still use the LCR panning technique, which is just left, center, right, nothing else. And that actually gives you a great Bill Putnam, Universal Audio early Bill Putnam sound. I love that. But I actually use every little notch of my digital panner on Pro Tools or in Logic. And this is another great way to create separation, panning. So panning is the second way to create separation. The first way, obviously, is either owning a large format console or a little sidecar, a little small console. I love these old field mixers turned into sidecars. I'm a huge fan of those. And the third way is panning. Another way is EQ, and there's a plethora of other ways to create separation. But the point is, you should be searching for separation in your mixes. And how do we know if we've achieved separation? Well, one good way to know is if it's not muddy anymore. If your mix sounds clear and clean, and you can close your eyes, and you can pick out the bass over here, you can pick out the snare over here, you can pick out the vocal over here, the guitar, something sounds back and to the left. When you've created this otherworldly 3D soundstage, you know you have achieved separation, and that is a huge part of mixing. I sounded like Donald Trump there. Huge. It's a huge part of mixing, a huge part. Waves has their own version of a spectral analyzer and a loudness meter and phase correlation meter. The Waves version is great. DK has one that's really good. Doro has one. TC Electronics has one. Even Dolby has one. There's lots of great tools out there to help you with that. So that's number 9. Number 10. Wow, number 9 was really long. I'm sorry. Number 10 is don't expect your artists to have their instruments in tune, to show up on time, to be sober, to be thinking clearly. That may sound a little obvious, but I just want to say real quick, I think 9 out of 10 times the guitarist's guitar is not only out of tune, but the intonation is off. Now when the intonation is off, that means the guitar needs a setup, and that means that that guitar is unacceptable to be used in a professional recording, and it's your job to say that guitar's not gonna work, and they're gonna fight you tooth and nail. So, all right, mate, that is my guitar. I've been using this on tracks since I was a child. I'm only gonna use this guitar. You bloody wanker. You can't put your name on that type of a recording, and you also can't insult the artist. You also have to figure out how to be a diplomatic human being about these things, because the engineer is not the flight attendant of the recording session. Don't ever tell the artist this, but you are the captain of the plane. Unless you're working with Prince's ghost, you should be the most knowledgeable engineer in that room. Number 11, if half of your job is to get good recordings, quality sounding recording, the other half of your job is to be a good hang. I learned this in conservatory. I had numerous professors tell me you have to be an approachable, fun person to be around, someone who can work in any environment. And I'm gonna tell you a golden nugget right now. The difference between a professional and an amateur is how you deal with problems. There is invariably always a problem. Things don't work properly. People come in hungover. People come in with just bad attitudes. Personalities clash. You're having a bad day. The gear is having a bad day. You have to know how to deal with these problems without losing your crap. If you're a yeller, a complainer, someone who grumbles, someone who can't deal with problems, you're in the wrong business. This is a service industry. You need to get behind the curtain. You should be a mastering engineer. So the key to number 11 of being a good hang is understanding this fundamental principle. The artist must feel just as comfortable in your space as they do in their space. Andrew Sheps has talked about this a lot, and I emphatically agree with him. And he says that the artist has to be totally comfortable to the point of absolute vulnerability, because to be a true artist and to give a performance in front of a recording device, you have to be absolutely vulnerable. You have to channel all the emotions you had when you originally wrote the song all over again. That's a difficult task. You have to be in that moment, and to do that, you have to feel comfortable. And for some artists, that might be totally alone with a strong cup of coffee, with just you and them in the room. And for other artists, it's surrounded by all their friends with a ton of beer. So it depends what type of artist you're working with and what they need. And it's also your job to figure out where they perform best and give them that environment. They may say they need to be drunk and stoned, and guess what? Chances are that's not true. They need to be focused and sober. That's when you're gonna get the best take, you're gonna make the best record, and you're gonna have the best sense of fulfillment. Number 12, freelancing is not free. You are not doing this out of the kindness of your heart. You have a talent, you studied your craft, practice and repetition, you've been doing it for years and years. You have an intangible product you sell, and it's called time and talent, and it's not free. And you know what? If you're giving it away for free, quit pissing in our river that we all swim in. I see young budding photographers shooting weddings for $300. What are you doing? I've spent 30 years studying sound. With every breath I take, that's all I do. Do I not deserve to be compensated? In America, when people ask you, what do you do? Maybe you play guitar, and their response is invariably, oh, you play? You play a guitar, but what do you do for a living? But what is your job? My job is to create audio content. But how do you pay your bills? I pay my bills with my passions and my creativity. But what are you gonna do when you grow up and you wanna have a 401k and actually have a real life? I will continue to produce audio content. It's as if people can't wrap their head around it, and it's really sad. And it's also a very American thing. Not every country treats artists the way American society treats artists. If you're an aspiring artist in America, your mother is probably saying things to you like, you're never gonna be the next Justin Bieber, as if you're trying to do that or be that. But what will you do when you get older and you need to focus on your family and feed them? Tell them, I will feed them with my income that I generate by producing audio content. It's the same reason that the first elective to be cut in a public school in this country is music and art. It's a collective, indoctrinated, flaming dumpster of garbage, and it drives me absolutely, you know what? No, it breaks my heart is what it does. Because there are so many creatives that feel like they have to give up on their dreams and instead kneel down to worship the almighty dollar. And you can make a living out of this. The average touring musician in America, according to Taxi, guess how much they make? $50,000 a year. That's not a lot of money. And if you do want to live a comfortable life, and money is relatively important to you, you do want to have some kind of diversified income. And audio engineering is a great way for a musician to do that, because not only can you record yourself, but you can flip gear and make money, you can record other people for money, you can do commercial audio work for money, you can work on things that you love, like maybe you're a gamer and you can work on video games. Whatever you do, don't do it for free, especially if you're starting out. Never work for free. Never ever work for free. Unless your brother-in-law calls you and he needs a favor to make him some YouTube audio content or something. And even then, think about a barter trade. Being a freelancer does not mean we work for free. Have some faith in yourself. Believe in yourself. In order to get paid for what you do, you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over. You have to keep studying and learning and researching to become better and better every day. I think that's a misconception that people say, well, I tried doing music and I have a 9-to-5 now because it didn't work. But how hard did you really try? When I was in college, I remember my professor told us the difference between the intern who gets the assistant gig, who becomes an engineer, and the guys who fail is because it all depends on who stuck around and who kept fighting and who tucked their tail and ran. That's the difference between those who succeed and those who fail. If you give up, it's over. If you stick with it, it's still going. It's as simple as that. So you put those two things together and you can't lose. The old cliche, never give up on your hopes and dreams, as cliche as that sounds, it is a fundamental truth of success. And the other one, being a freelancer is not free. Expect to be paid and to be paid well for what you do, and never give up, and you will be successful. So each one teach one. Pass this on to somebody else. Share this video with another budding engineer. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that little bell notification so when I do make these videos, you are notified about it. Take care of one another, love one another. Peace and love, Planet Rock.